Yep, that's him, Jacob something. Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order by asking everyone to first to silence cell phones and electronic devices. Just going to be patient as I do the same. So I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga-Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We'll move into the approval of the agenda with a motion moved by Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council amend the April 11th, 2023 planning meeting agenda to add a bylaw for Council's passing for file OPA 03-2022, Z11-2022, and B14-2022, but that will just be the bylaw amendment for the zoning bylaw. All the other two files will be dealt with in the staff report and our motion after the staff report. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright. The Council approved the April 11th, 2023 planning meeting agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have one delegation this evening from Jacob Dickie and Terrance Glover of Urban Mind with regard to land use planning applications OPA 03-2022, Z11-2022, and B14-2022. And is that Jacob or Terrance in front of me on the screen?
It's Jacob here.
Hello. Yep, there you go. Okay, Jacob, I'll turn the floor over to you for your delegation.
Okay. Yeah, I prepared a brief presentation here. Okay, it looks like we have it up in front. I was going to share my screen. What is the typical procedure here? Am I able to share my screen?
You go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Oh, I can't share screen, it says.
Just give us 10 seconds. Now you go ahead and share your screen. There you go.
Okay, can everyone see?
We can.
Okay, perfect. All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, councillors. As you know, my name is Jacob Dickie. I'm from Urban Mind Planning Consultants, and I'm acting as the agent on behalf of the owner of 2830 Division Street North for the proposed rezoning and consent applications, which would result in the creation of 2 single detached lots, each one containing 3 units, which includes the primary dwelling and 2 additional residential units. Beginning with the site context, the subject property is located on the west side of Division Street, just south of Chapel Street, and is within less than 300 meters from the businesses on Main Street. The site maintains a total lot area of just over 1,000 square meters, a frontage of 26.9 meters onto Division Street, and is substantially larger in size than most of the surrounding properties, hence the reason for redevelopment. The surrounding neighborhood contains a diverse range of architectural styles, setbacks, and lot sizes, which reflects different periods of construction and development. The property is currently occupied by a duplex, which is slated to be demolished to make room for the new development. Moving on to the policy context, on the provincial level, the property is located within the growth plans delineated built-up area, as highlighted in purple, which is planned to accommodate the majority of the province's forecasted population growth, primarily through infill development, such as what's being proposed in our applications. And this is done to prevent urban sprawl and the fragmentation of both agricultural lands and sensitive natural heritage features. According to the Northumberland County Official Plan, the subject property falls within an urban area. The county's official plan contains policies that speak to promoting higher residential densities on underutilized lands to promote the better use of municipal infrastructure, and the proposal accomplishes such. According to the Brighton official plan, the subject property falls within the residential land use designation. The Brighton official plan speaks to promoting a variety of different housing types within residential areas to accommodate the diverse housing needs of the town's growing population. And again, our proposal will provide for rental housing options, ownership housing options, as well as additional residential units. So this will help to diversify the current housing stock. Moving on to zoning, currently the lands are zoned as urban residential 2, R2. A rezoning is required in order to fine-tune development standards in order to allow for the proposed additional residential units to properly function on the lands. Hence the reason for the proposed rezoning to the urban residential 2 special designation with site-specific provisions. Moving on to the site plan, the intention is to divide the lands into 2 separate single detached lots. Again, each building will contain 3 units, which includes the primary dwelling and 2 additional residential units. 5 parking spaces are proposed on each lot, with 4 being located in the rear and 1 being located in the front yard, which exceeds the total parking requirement of 4 spaces. Amenity space is provided in the front yard and in the rear yard, where garbage storage pads and small accessory structures for storage will also be provided in the rear. So overall, it is quite the high quality development. Moving on to the proposed site-specific provisions. So we're proposing 3 site-specific provisions that we're requesting for approval. The first is a reduced lot frontage from 15 meters to 13.45 meters, which only represents a 1.55 meter difference. The proposed reduced lot frontage will still be compatible with the surrounding lot fabric, and there will still be enough space on the site to allow for a functional development as a result of the deep lots. Second is providing a minimum of 10 square meters of common amenity space, whereas for each additional residential unit, whereas the bylaw currently requires 10 square meters of private amenity space for each additional residential unit. Given that the proposal will be communal in nature, it just makes more sense to do this. And finally, the third is to allow for access to an additional residential unit to be provided from the front wall instead of a side or a rear wall, which allows for a more functional design, a better allocation of space, given the deep lots, while also promoting public visibility and community safety from the streetscape. And I'm sure many of you are aware that as a result of the recent provincial legislation introduced under Bill 23, 3 units are now permitted as of right on all urban residential parcels, which is exactly what we are proposing with the primary dwelling unit and the 2 additional residential units. That being said, we do conform with the current parking, landscaping, building height, front yard, rear yard, side yard setback requirements of the current R2 zone. Overall, we believe that the proposed development is representative of good planning, as it will reinvigorate an underutilized parcel of land with new high-quality infill development that will blend in nicely into the existing neighborhood fabric. Further, it will provide for much-needed rental units that will bring in new residents to help support local businesses and add to the municipal tax base. So that's it for my presentation. I'm open to any questions, should there be any.
Thank you, Jacob. I'll open the floor to members of council for questions of clarification on your presentation. Council? Councillor Wheeldon?
Thank you, through you, Chair. The 10 meters of common space, that's per unit. So each one would have an additional 20 meters of common space in the back. Is that?
So the current requirement is 10 square meters of private amenity space for each additional residential unit. So that doesn't include the primary dwelling. So in that case, under the current zoning requirement, only 20 square meters of private amenity spaces are required. That being said, we have well over 30 square meters of amenity space. It's just given the communal nature of the development, we had to kind of amend the language in that particular provision. But we do exceed 20 square meters, which is currently required. So I hope that answers your question.
I think so. I guess I'm getting the sense that you didn't want to have to put up fences between every 10-meter space.
Well, I can bring you to the site plan.
Well,
just give me a second here.
It's I understand.
Okay.
I'm just being cheeky.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you both. Councillor Ferretis.
To the chair, thank you. And perhaps just a question on clarification on frontage. My recollection from an earlier application this year was someone took exception at us granting a reduction in frontage from 16.5 to 16.1 meters, but this talks about frontage at 15 meters. Is there a distinction between R1 and R2 and R3 in terms of frontage, or is this an anomaly in the number? I'm a little puzzled and confused.
I think I'll get Mr. Warren to answer that question.
Through the chair, there's a distinction in frontage between each zone. So each zoning category could have a different frontage, yes.
And so in the case of R2, the frontage requirement is 15 meters, and this application considers 13, is asking us to consider a 13.45 meter frontage. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
approximately 5 feet narrower than what the zoning regulation would normally require. Yes.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Motion before me is moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council received the presentation from Jacob Dickie, Urban in Mind, Professional Urban Planning. Any questions or comments on the motion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Dickie. We appreciate your presentation, and we'll be looking to make a decision on this file as we move it forward in the meeting here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have no statutory public meeting this evening, which brings us to planning and development reports. The first report is with regard to the land use planning application from the delegation we just heard, which is 28 to 30 Division Street. Mr. Warren, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. I have a motion before me. Give me a second. It's a long one.
It's a long one.
It's moved by Councillor Ferretis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council receives a staff report dated April 11th, 2023 regarding consent application B014-2022 and zoning bylaw amendment application Z11 2022 as prepared by staff. And further, that council enacts a bylaw to rezone the subject lands municipally known as 28 to 30 Division Street to include site-specific provisions for lot frontage, common amenity area, and exterior access to units as detailed in this staff report. And further, that council grant provisional consent to application B014-2022, subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. That application for zoning bylaw amendment Z11 2022 is finally approved. All appeals have been exhausted. The owner provides the municipality with a check in the amount of $500 as total payment in lieu of parkland dedication contribution for the new lot created. Prior to endorsing the deed for the severed lot, the Director of Engineering, Infrastructure and Works shall indicate satisfaction with the application's lot grading and drainage plan prepared by a professional engineer or an Ontario land surveyor with thorough knowledge in the design and construction of drainage matters. The plan shall address how existing and proposed drainage will be handled. The drainage plan shall be registered on the title of the lands through a consent development agreement. Should the plan reveal any drainage paths emitting to or from a public highway or public right-of-way, the applicant shall convey appropriate easements to the municipality. The owner applies for and obtains an entrance permit and civic address to the severed lands. A signed letter is received from the applicant of file number OPA 03-2022 requesting its closure without further action on it to be taken. Separate lateral servicing connections of sanitary sewer and water have been installed for the severed and retained lots to the satisfaction of the Department of Infrastructure and Works. The applicant enter into a development agreement with the Municipality of Brighton, which implements the recommendations or conclusions of the following reports as may be varied and finally accepted through the direction of municipal staff. Site plan, landscape plan, site servicing plan, lot grading plan, elevations and floor plans, functional servicing report, stormwater management report, butternut hybridization report. This agreement is to be registered on title to the subject lands and a copy of the registered document provided to the Department of Planning and Development. The following covenant is to be inserted in the transfer and executed by the transferee. The transferee acknowledges that this transfer is subject to the terms of an agreement between the transferee and the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton, registered as instrument number HT, and then a blank portion to be filled in. That all taxes on the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the Department of Planning and Development. The surveyor deposit with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. And further, that council provide direction to staff to close file number OPA 03-2022 as the amendment is no longer required in order to implement the approved development plan for the subject lands. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. If you're all going to make me read something that long, you could at least do the courtesy of asking a question or two. Yeah, it's in your report. Read it yourself. Thank you, everyone, for that. Appreciate it. And we move on to Hamilton Woods subdivision removal of H holding for phase 4, Gordon Toby Developments. Mr. Warren, we've read this report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
No further comment at this time.
Thank you, sir. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council receives a staff report regarding zoning bylaw amendment application Z02-2023. And further, that council enacts a bylaw having the effect of removing the holding provision on lands pertaining to the phase 4 Hamilton Woods subdivision. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no items for information purposes listed on this evening's agenda, which takes us to unfinished business, specifically Ontario Land Tribunal Appeal, Notice of Passing Z06-2022, Notice of Decision B07-2022, being 207 Ontario Street. Director Walsh, would you like to speak to this? Mr. Warren?
I have no further comment. It was a very short tribunal.
Thank you. Motion before me is moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council receives the decision of the Ontario Land Tribunal for appeal. Notice of passing Z06-2022, notice of decision B07-2022, the property is 207 Ontario Street, and further that council approve the amendments to bylaws 057-2022. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. That takes us into bylaws. First bylaw is with regard to zoning amendment for 2439 County Road 30. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands described as part of lots 2 and 3, part of road allowance between lots 2 and 3, concession 7, and part of lot 36, part of road allowance between lot 2, concession 7, and lot 36, concession 5, now being parts 1 to 12 on registered plan 39R 14435. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next bylaw is with regard to zoning bylaw for Hamilton Woods subdivision, moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 36 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 112/2019 to remove the holding symbol on the subject lands described as part lot 15, registered plan 28, and part of lots 1 and 2, concession 1, Municipality of Brighton, County of Northumberland. Any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the third and final bylaw added by amendment this evening is moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 28 to 30 Division Street, legally described as Part 1 of Plan 39R 14099. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Mr. Toby, do you have any questions this evening? You're the only one here. Yeah, we all have that question sometimes. We have no closed session meeting this evening. We have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton planning meeting held on April 11th, 2023. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And finally, a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright, that the April 11th, 2023 planning meeting adjourn at 6:53 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thanks for coming out to a 23-minute long meeting.